Hello, and welcome back to Common Understanding. Today I will be discussing North Carolina's House Bill 2, or HB 2 for short. Though to fully understand North Carolina's HB 2, we must first look at the City of Charlotte's Ordinance 7056. The purpose of CCO 7056, as stated in Section 2, 152, reads as: it is the intent of the city to avoid becoming a passive participant in private sector commercial discrimination by refusing to procure goods and services from business firms that discriminate in the solicitation, selection, hiring, or treatment of vendors, suppliers, subcontractors, or commercial customers on the basis of race, gender, religion, national origin, ethnicity, age, marital status, familiar status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or disability in connection with city contracts or solicitations by providing a procedure for receiving, investigating, and resolving complaints of discrimination involving city contracts or solicitations. So what does this all mean then? Well, lucky for us, the City of Charlotte also explicitly stated what is prohibited in Section 1258. As stated in Section 1258, prohibited acts: it shall be unlawful to deny any person the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of a place of public accommodation because of their race, color, religion, sex, marital status, familial status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin. You might have noticed nowhere in these two paragraphs does it say anything about boys going into girls' bathrooms.
Boys who may think they're a girl can go into a girl's locker room or restroom or shower facility.
As a matter of fact, nowhere in the entire wording of this ordinance does the word bathroom even appear. This is because CCO 7056 is not a bathroom bill. It is a true anti-discrimination bill. In Section 1258, Part A, it explicitly states that it is unlawful to deny any person the full and equal enjoyment of goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of a place of public accommodation. Notice how the wording specifically says goods and services. This is because CCO 7056 is a true anti-discrimination bill, unlike HB 2. When the lawmakers of Charlotte wrote the ordinance, they did not only have equal bathroom use in mind, they also thought about equal opportunities in employment and housing. Before CCO 7056 was passed, it was legal to deny someone services, housing, or a job simply because of their gender identification, sexual orientation, or gender identity. But on February 22nd, 2016, the City of Charlotte changed all that by passing CCO 7056. Though CCO 7056 seemed to be the anti-discrimination bill that even the Greensboro Four would be proud of, the citizens of Charlotte had their rights taken away by their own state government not even 1 month later. 29 days, or 23 business days, as Pat McCrory would say, was how long CCO 7056 stood as law in the city of Charlotte. On March 23, 2016, HB 2 was signed into law. It should be noted that HB 2 was signed in record time, reportedly less than 12 hours. Now, despite what the media may have you believe, HB 2 is not just a bathroom bill, nor is it an anti-discrimination bill, as the Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest would say.
The bill is an anti-discrimination bill. It was the first public anti-discrimination bill in the state's history.
One of the Lieutenant Governor's biggest complaints is that the critics of HB 2 have simply not even read the bill.
These business leaders that are outcrying right now have not even read the bill, and I've talked to many of them who admit they haven't read the bill.
Though based on his cocky smile, the ignorance of his own citizens seemed to be of no concern or even a priority.
Who admit they haven't read the bill.
So in an attempt to appease the Lieutenant Governor, let's look into HB 2. To start off, the bill itself is only 5 pages long. If you take out the introduction and the closing statements, including any other of the white space, the actual text boils down to less than 4 pages. So the fact that the Lieutenant Governor is so giddy that its citizens haven't even read it is beyond me. On page 1, line 24, HB 2 establishes the namesake part of the bill. This is where you find the definition of biological sex and who can and can't use single-sex, multiple occupancy, bathroom, and changing facilities. Biological sex, as described on page 1, line 34, is the condition of being born male or female, which is stated on a person's birth certificate. So by narrowing the definition of what sex is, HB 2 effectively discriminates against anyone who does not comply with what the state calls their biological sex. But this is where things get a little confusing, even between the lieutenant governor and the governor himself. As I stated earlier, the lieutenant governor claims that HB 2 is the first anti-discrimination bill signed into law in years in the state of North Carolina, and that the citizens of North Carolina should be happy with their state government for being so accepting and non-discriminatory. Though when Governor Pat McCrory is pressed on the same topics, his answers are a little different. In a Fox News interview with Chris Wallace compares the current segregation endorsed by HB 2 to the segregation experienced during the 1960s with white and black Americans.
Would it be overreach for the Justice Department to send you a letter like this to say you cannot have bathrooms in the state capitol, one for white and one for black?
I don't think there's any correlation between the two, and I think it's
But would you
misleading.
agree that that is within the federal government's purview?
Absolutely, but we can definitely define the race of people. It's very hard to define transgender or gender identity.
But the point is, the reason I ask is that the Justice Department says that just like whites and blacks, that transgender people are a protected class.
Right, and
that has a legal meaning, a protected class under the 1964 Civil Rights Law.
That's what they say, but that's not what the federal law says. That's not what the federal law says. That's not what the federal law says.
So on one hand, you have the Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest, who swears that HB 2 is the first anti-discrimination bill signed into the state in years, while on the other, Governor Pat McCrory himself says transgender people are not a protected class. So by effectively calling the transgender community a non-protected class, he just then endorsed and legalized discrimination for an entire community in the state of North Carolina. As if the open discrimination of transgender people using bathrooms and changing facilities wasn't bad enough, HB 2 went even further to disenfranchise and alienate the transgender community by the legislative declaration written on page 3, line 53. It is the public policy of the state to protect and safeguard the right and opportunity of all persons to seek, obtain, and hold employment without discrimination or abridgment on the account of race, religion, color, national origin, age, biological sex, or handicap by employers which regularly employ 15 or more employees. Once again, North Carolina lawmakers narrowed the protections of the law by adding the word biological in front of sex. Just as with the bathroom part of HB 2, by excluding anyone who does not comply with what North Carolina calls their biological sex, HB 2 has made it legal to discriminate against an entire community. As if to add insult to injury, the following paragraph is found on page 4, line 1. It is recognized that the practice of denying employment opportunity and discriminating in the terms of employment foments domestic strife and unrest, deprives the state of the fullest utilization of its capabilities for advancement, development, and substantially and adversely affects the interest of employees, employers, and the public in general. So immediately after a paragraph that legalizes discrimination against the transgender community, North Carolina's lawmakers recognize that any and all discrimination is bad. But they go even further to take away the rights of the transgender community in yet the next paragraph. The General Assembly declares that the regulation of discriminatory practices in employment is properly an issue of general statewide concern, such that this article and other applicable provisions of the general statutes supersede and preempt any ordinance, they're talking about CCO 7056 there, regulation, resolution, or policy adopted or imposed by a unit of local government or other political subdivision of the state that regulates or imposes any requirement upon an employer pertaining to the regulation of discriminatory practices in employment, except such regulations applicable to personnel employed by that body that are not otherwise in conflict with state law. So to recap the last 3 paragraphs. First, North Carolina lawmakers make it legal to discriminate against transgender people in the workplace. Second, they realize that any and all types of discrimination are detrimental to the employer, employee, and the state in general. And third, they take away any rights and protections that bills such as CCO 7056 may have provided them. Now to circle back to Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest.
These business leaders that are outcrying right now have not even read the bill.
Oh, wait, no, sorry, that was the wrong one.
I've been meeting with audiences ever since we did this. I said, please, if there's one person in this audience that disagrees with this, please raise your hand and tell me why you think it's okay for men to walk in women's restrooms and for men to go into girls' locker rooms and girls' showers facilities in our state. And I haven't found one person yet to stand up and tell me why that's okay.
First of all, Lieutenant Governor, nowhere in CCO 7056 does it advocate for men to walk into women's restrooms or for men to go into girls' locker rooms and girls' shower facilities. If you would have read CCO 7056, you would have already known that. But consider this a raised hand, if you will, Lieutenant Governor. I disagree. HB 2 is nothing more than a disguised discrimination bill that draws parallels to the Jim Crow laws, Plessy v. Ferguson, and the previous statewide ban on same-sex marriages. I will explain my reasoning using previous federal and Supreme Court case rulings provided to you in the letter sent to you by the DOJ. Again, Lieutenant Governor, if you would have only read that letter, you too would have known HB 2 is unconstitutional. On May 4th, 2016, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice sent a letter to North Carolina about HB 2. The letter states that North Carolina's HB 2 is in direct violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In Title VII, Section 703, Part 1, the Civil Rights Act explicitly states that workplace discrimination based on an individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin is unlawful. Notice how in the wording of the Civil Rights Act, it does not include the word biological in front of the word sex. This is where the controversy on HB 2's legality lies. Governor Pat McCrory claims that because the Civil Rights Act does not explicitly state gender expression or gender identity, that those groups of people do not have protections under Title VII, therefore making it legal to discriminate against them. In a press conference on May 9, 2016, he goes even further to claim that the Obama administration is going beyond their powers and bypassing Congress.
Now, right now, the Obama administration is bypassing Congress by attempting to rewrite the law.
He then continues to say that a federal judge should define what the law means.
We believe a court, rather than a federal agency, should tell our state, our nation, and employers across the country what the law requires.
Well, Governor, if you had only read the letter sent to you by the DOJ, you would have seen the multiple federal and Supreme Court cases that ruled in favor of transgender rights. And before anyone says Obama somehow altered the outcomes of these court cases, every single court case I am about to present happened before 2008, before Obama had any presidential power. 27 years ago, in 1989, the Supreme Court decided the case of Ann Hopkins versus Price Waterhouse. Ann Hopkins sued Price Waterhouse under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, claiming that she was denied a promotion for her not matching a gender stereotype set by her superiors. Reportedly, Ann Hopkins was advised by Thomas Baer, her superior, that she should have walked more femininely, talked more femininely, dressed more femininely, wear more makeup, have her hair styled, and wear jewelry. This was a landmark Supreme Court case that decided discrimination against an employee on the basis of sex stereotyping, that is, a person's nonconformity to social or other expectations of a person's gender constitutes impermissible sex discrimination in violation of Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The Supreme Court confirmed Ann Hopkins' claim that she was denied a promotion on the basis of sex discrimination. 14 years later, on August 5, 2004, the United States 6th District Court of Appeals decided the case of Smith versus the City of Salem, Ohio. Smith was a male lieutenant for 7 years in the Salem Fire Department. After being diagnosed with gender identity disorder, or GID, Smith began his transition to female. Though he tried to keep it a secret from his coworkers, they eventually noticed the changing in his own appearance. Smith then approached his supervisor, Thomas Eastic, in order to explain his transition and to resolve any coworkers' concerns. At the meeting, Thomas Eastic agreed not to tell anything to Walter Greenmeyer, the fire department chief, but he did so anyway. Armed with the knowledge of Smith's GID and his transsexualism, Greenmeyer met with C. Brooks Zellers, the law director of the City of Salem, to find a way to terminate Smith's employment. On April 18, 2001, Greenmeyer, along with Zellers, organized a meeting that included then Salem's mayor, auditor, service director, and safety director. Together they came up with a series of testings and probations in order to terminate Smith's employment at the fire department. Smith then sued the fire department, claiming that they discriminated against him in his employment on the basis of sex under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. On August 5, 2004, the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals ultimately ruled that Title VII protections did apply to transgender people. Only 7 months later, in the neighboring town of Cincinnati, the court case of Felicia Barnes versus Cincinnati was decided by the same 6th District U.S. Court of Appeals. An amazing case summary was written by Valerie A. Lemmy, the city manager of Cincinnati at the time of the case. Here is an excerpt from her memo. In the lawsuit, Sergeant Barnes alleged that the city of Cincinnati engaged in illegal discrimination when the CPD failed Sergeant Barnes on probation following the probationary period required for promotion to the rank of police sergeant. During such period in 1999, Sergeant Barnes was a preoperative male-to-female transsexual who conducted himself as a male during work hours in the police department and as a female during off hours. Sergeant Barnes argued that the failure to promotion was due to illegal sex discrimination based on a failure to conform to sexual stereotypes. In contrast, the city argued that Sergeant Barnes' probationary failure was due to poor performance during the probationary period. Sergeant Barnes challenged the motion under Title VII in the Equal Protection Clause, which resulted in a favorable jury verdict. The Sixth Circuit reaffirmed its recent ruling in Smith versus the City of Salem, Ohio, in which it found that a label such as transsexual is not fatal to a sex discrimination claim where the victim has suffered discrimination because of his or her gender nonconformity. Thus, the court ruled that Sergeant Barnes was a member of a protected class and had established that the city discriminated against him for failure to conform to sexual stereotypes. Once again, the U.S. court system held that discrimination against sex also includes nonconformity to sexual stereotypes, and that these protections also include the transgender community. And finally, the case of Diane J. Schroer versus James H. Billington, in which Schroer claimed that she was denied employment by the Librarian of Congress because of sex in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. She also served in the U.S. Armed Forces for 25 years. During this time, she held important command and staff positions in the Armed Cavalry, Airborne, Special Forces, and Special Operations units, and in combat operations in Haiti and Rwanda. Before retiring with the rank of colonel, she held a top-secret security information clearance, in which she regularly briefed senior military and government officials, including the then Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chief of Staffs. At the time Schroer filled out her application, she used her then legal name David, for she was still legally a male at this time, though this act of honesty ended up being used against her later. Being impressed by her qualifications and extensive resume, Schroer was asked for an interview for the position. Out of the other 18 candidates, Schroer was deemed the most qualified by a large margin. Being satisfied with her marriage, Charlotte Pierce, the hiring manager, offered her a one-on-one lunch interview. It was during this interview that Shower disclosed that she was a transgender. Pierce's first response to this was, "Why in the world would you do that?" To which Shower explained that she did not see being transgender as a choice, and that it was something she had lived with her entire life. After hearing this information, Pierce explained concerns about Shower's ability to retain her security clearance and any of her inside contacts in the armed forces. Shower explained that her security clearance would not be lost due to her being a transgender, nor would she lose her insider contacts. Though not expressed at the interview, Pierce had already decided not to hire Shower based on her transsexualism. Even though Pierce and all of her colleagues previously praised Shower's merits and qualifications. Though Shower argued that she was not hired because of her transsexuality, Charlotte Pierce gave 5 official reasons to the court. The 5 reasons Pierce gave were her loss of insider military contacts, credibility with Congress, trustworthiness, in reference to her not disclosing she was a transgender during her first interview, transition distracting her from work, ability to obtain and keep a top secret security clearance. The court ruled that they were all true reasons, but were also all pretext for discrimination. District Judge James Robertson went even further to say none of the 5 assertively legitimate reasons that the library has given for refusing to hire Shower withstands scrutiny. In the end, the court decided that in refusing to hire Diane Shower because of her appearance and background did not conform with the decision-makers' sex stereotypes about how men and women should act and appear, and in response to Shower's decision to transition legally, culturally, and physically from male to female, the Library of Congress violated Title VII's prohibition on sex discrimination. As clearly evident in the previously stated court rulings, transgender people are a protected class under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This being so, HB 2 is unconstitutional. Though this hasn't stopped 11 states from suing the DOJ and the Obama administration. Only time will tell what will come from the pending lawsuits surrounding HB 2. But one thing is clear. If the lieutenant governor and governor would have only done their own reading and research, they too would know HB 2 is unconstitutional. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed my presentation, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more weekly content. If you want to watch anything more, check out my 2 videos I have listed here, one on the Religious Freedom Acts in America, and another dispelling the myths of the millennial generation. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.